Hey viewers! Hope you're all doing great. Before I start the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you enjoy my videos, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. The secret cities beneath medieval Jerusalem. Listen. Can you hear it? The faint hum beneath the earth. The whisper of stone. The quiet echo of a city layered upon itself. This is Jerusalem. Not the one you see beneath the sun, but the one buried in silence. City beneath a city. A secret that began long before the Middle Ages, and continued to breathe quietly through them. Jerusalem, for more than 3,000 years, it has been built, destroyed, and built again, each era leaving its bones beneath the next. By the time the medieval centuries arrived, between the 11th and 15th centuries, the surface of Jerusalem was only a fraction of its true self. Beneath its markets, mosques, synagogues and churches, there stretched a labyrinth of tunnels, cisterns, catacombs and forgotten streets. This is where our journey begins. Take a slow breath in. Feel the weight of the ancient air, cool, dusty, scented faintly of limestone and oil lamps. Now imagine yourself walking down a narrow stone passage. Your hand trails along the cold wall, smoothed by centuries of touch. A single flame lights your way, flickering softly as you descend into the medieval underground of Jerusalem. The origins of these hidden spaces reach back to the time of the First Temple, long before the Crusaders and Caliphs. But during the medieval period, these ancient tunnels gained new life, reused, rebuilt, and sometimes entirely forgotten by those above. By the 11th century, Jerusalem was a city of tension, sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and constantly changing hands. Each conquest reshaped its streets, but beneath, the old foundations remained. One of the most remarkable of these underground systems lies beneath the Temple Mount, known to Muslims as Haram al-Sharif. During medieval times, when the city passed under Fatimid, Crusader, and later Ayyubid control, this area was a focal point of power. Beneath it ran chambers and tunnels, some originally built to drain rainwater, others designed as secret routes for priests or guards. Among them was the Warren shaft system, rediscovered in the 19th century but dating back much earlier. In medieval times it was already ancient, yet still in use. It connected the Gihon Spring, Jerusalem's oldest water source, to the city walls. During sieges, it allowed the people within the walls to draw water unseen by their enemies. Imagine it. During the Crusades, when the city was encircled and soldiers' torches glimmered on the hills, a handful of residents crept down into this darkness to fetch life itself, water, from beneath the earth. The Silwan Tunnel, often called Hezekiah's Tunnel, also played its part. Though carved centuries before Christ, in the Middle Ages it became part of the living structure of the city, a hidden artery under the Kidron Valley. Travelers' diaries from the 12th century speak of locals who whispered about dark rivers beneath Jerusalem, waters that flowed through rock like veins under skin. When the Crusaders captured Jerusalem in 1099, they entered not only the streets but the strata of history. They dug beneath sacred sites, seeking relics of Christ, fragments of the true cross, the tombs of prophets, or the Ark itself. Their chroniclers mention caverns beneath the Temple of Solomon, now known to us as the subterranean halls of Solomon's stables. These vast chambers, supported by rows of pillars, were used by the Crusaders to house their horses, giving birth to the legend of Solomon's stables. But in truth, these structures were part of the Herodian platform built 1,000 years earlier, reused and reimagined by each new ruler. Here, under torchlight, the Knights Templar kept their war horses, their banners, their weapons, and as rumor whispered, their secrets. The Templars believed themselves protectors of the temple, and perhaps they found something beneath it, old scrolls, ritual chambers, or hidden treasures. No proof survives, but the fascination endures, feeding centuries of speculation. Meanwhile, on the surface, medieval Jerusalem bustled with trade, prayer, and conflict. But underground, the city remained silent, a second Jerusalem that held memories of every empire. Muslim engineers cleaned old aqueducts and cisterns to restore water to mosques and fountains. Christian monks turned ancient tombs into shrines. Jewish pilgrims sought the last standing remnants of Solomon's temple, often in dark, narrow passages where prayer echoed off wet stone. Each community left traces beneath the earth. A small oil lamp, a scratched prayer in Greek or Arabic, a cross cut roughly into limestone, signs of human presence in places where the sun never shone. You can almost hear it, the faint dripping of water from the ceiling, the shuffle of feet centuries apart, the heartbeat of a city still alive beneath its own ruins. Jerusalem was not one city. It was many, stacked and hidden, each whispering to the next. And through the Middle Ages, these whispers grew louder as the world above changed. Breathe slowly now. Imagine that ancient air brushing your face. Candle flickers ahead. You follow it, step by step, into the deeper secrets of the medieval city. The light grows dimmer as we descend another level below the stones. You can almost smell the centuries. Limestone dust, oil smoke, the faint sweetness of wax from candles burned long ago. It is the 12th century now. Jerusalem has fallen to the Crusaders. The air above the city rings with the chants of Latin priests and the clash of armor. But below, another story unfolds. Quiet, secret, and older than any army. After 1099, when the Crusaders took Jerusalem, they began to rebuild. Churches, monasteries, and fortifications. But beneath these, they also rediscovered what lay forgotten. They found the ancient channels and tombs of the city's earliest past. Their curiosity was both sacred and practical. They sought holy relics, and they needed water, storage, and protection. Beneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the most sacred site in Christianity, ran a series of caverns and chambers. Some had been Roman quarries, others early Christian burial sites. By the medieval period, they were transformed into chapels and crypts. Pilgrims descended by torchlight to kiss the stone where Christ was said to have been laid. The flicker of their lamps turned every shadow into a trembling mystery. The chapel of St. Helena, deep beneath the church, was one of these sanctuaries. Built by Crusaders in the 12th century upon older Byzantine foundations, it was named for the mother of Emperor Constantine, the woman who, according to legend, discovered the true cross. From its walls, carved crosses can still be seen, etched by the hands of medieval pilgrims who believed that here, under the earth, heaven felt closer. The soft chant of prayer would echo through the stone, a sound both holy and haunting. And yet, not all that was beneath Jerusalem belonged to faith. Some passages were purely functional, even secretive. Crusader engineers mapped the tunnels and cisterns that ran under the Temple Mount. They fortified entrances, sealed some chambers, and connected others to their fortresses. It was beneath this mount that the Knights Templar established their headquarters. Their order's name, Templars, was taken from this very place, the Templum Salomonis, the Temple of Solomon. For nearly a century they guarded the holy city, and in doing so they became part of its myth. Chroniclers spoke of their nightly descents into the deep vaults beneath the mount. Some said they were searching for hidden scriptures. Others whispered they found the Ark of the Covenant, though no proof has ever emerged. But archaeologists confirm, the Templars did indeed adapt the underground halls and chambers, strengthening them for use as stables, storage, and places of refuge. In the torchlight, the sound of hooves would echo off the vast pillars. Hundreds of horses, the lifeblood of the Crusader knights, were sheltered there. The air would have been heavy with heat, hay, and the metallic scent of armor. Above, Jerusalem glowed with faith. Below, it rumbled with the machinery of war. But the tides of history shift, as softly and inevitably as sand. In 1187, Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, known in the West as Saladin, recaptured Jerusalem. The Crusaders were expelled, and the Ayyubids reclaimed the city. The conqueror, known for his wisdom and restraint, forbade slaughter and destruction. He restored the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, which the Crusaders had converted into churches. And beneath these monuments, he ordered engineers to inspect and repair the underground chambers. The Ayyubid engineers were meticulous. They cleaned the ancient cisterns that caught rainwater from the mount. They reopened blocked aqueducts leading to the city's fountains. Records describe workers descending through narrow shafts, their lamps glimmering like stars swallowed by earth. In silence, they chipped away old debris, restoring the veins that kept Jerusalem alive. One such structure was the Bir el-Arwa, the Well of Souls, located beneath the Dome of the Rock. It was, and remains, a chamber reached by a staircase cut into solid rock. In Islamic tradition, it was said to be the place where the spirits of the dead gather to pray. But in medieval times, it also served a practical purpose, an acoustic and spiritual space that amplified the prayers above. Travelers described its strange stillness, a place where air breathes like a sigh. Every civilization that touched Jerusalem used its underground in its own way. The Byzantines had built crypts, the Umayyads shaped water channels, the Crusaders turned caverns into chapels, the Ayyubids restored the sacredness of the mount. Layer upon layer, faith upon faith, all intertwined beneath the same soil. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine standing in one of these chambers. The torch burns low, shadows crawl along the carved stone. Somewhere above, you can faintly hear the city. Merchants, muezzins, bells. But down here it is timeless. Only the drip of water, the breath of stone, and the echo of countless footsteps remain. Each tunnel leads to another story. Each chamber holds a fragment of memory. Crusader, Muslim, Jew, and pilgrim, all touching the same walls. The medieval city above lived, fought, and prayed. The city below remembered. And as the 13th century dawned, new rulers, new faiths, and new fears would once again reshape this buried world. But the stones, they never forgot. The year is 1250. The Crusader flags have faded from the ramparts, and the sound of hooves no longer echoes through the Templar halls. Above the ground, Jerusalem has grown still, sacred, tired, and beautiful in its weariness. But beneath, the heartbeat continues. Stone remembers what men forget. The Mamluks, soldiers of slave origins who rose to rule Egypt and Syria, inherited Jerusalem in the mid-13th century. They were not conquerors in the same way the Crusaders had been. Their wars were fought elsewhere. For them, Jerusalem was a jewel of devotion, a city of prayer, not a fortress to defend, but a sanctum to preserve. Under the Mamluks, the surface of the city blossomed again. New madrasas, fountains, marketplaces, and minarets rose across the hills. Yet below, the old networks of tunnels and cisterns were quietly reborn. The Mamluk builders were masters of water. Their engineers understood the veins of the earth. How to guide the rain, how to breathe life into dry stone. In the 14th century, the Ain Silwan Aqueduct, an ancient channel that had served kings and caliphs alike, was restored once more. It carried water from the Ghian spring to the Haram al-Sharif, feeding the fountains where worshippers washed before prayer. Travelers from Cairo and Damascus wrote of Jerusalem's hidden waters, and of workers who vanished underground for days, repairing channels that only a few knew existed. They walked through narrow tunnels where the ceiling brushed their backs, their lamps sending trembling reflections across the damp walls. When they emerged, their faces were pale with dust, but their eyes held the glow of something ancient, the pride of having touched the bones of the city itself. The Al-Aqsa Mosque, seated on the southern edge of the Temple Mount, stood above a labyrinth of medieval chambers. During the Mamluk centuries, these spaces were strengthened and expanded. One of them, known as the Al-Aqsa Marwani Prayer Hall, stretched in silent majesty beneath the plaza, its columns thick and worn, its arches carrying the weight of centuries. In earlier Crusader times, it had been a stable and a storehouse. Under the Mamluks, it returned to its original dignity, a house of prayer, calm and resonant. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it. The light of oil lamps swaying softly, the faint scent of cedar from the wooden beams, and a hush so deep that you can hear the sigh of the wind outside filtering down through the stone vents. The Mamluks valued this silence. They repaired the ancient cisterns beneath the Dome of the Rock, known as the Bir al-Kas and the Bir al-Arwa, to collect the winter rains. These underground reservoirs became sacred in their own right, for to preserve water in Jerusalem was to preserve life itself. Inscriptions from the period, carved in delicate Arabic script, can still be read on the walls above some entrances. He who gives water gives mercy. Above the ground, the city hummed with learning, schools and khans and sucks. But beneath, it remained introspective, quiet, slow. Many of the workers who dug these cisterns or repaired the ancient drains never knew whose footsteps they followed. Roman, Byzantine, Crusader, or Umayyad. They only knew the rhythm of the hammer, the cool touch of the earth, and the patience that stone demanded. By the late medieval centuries, Jerusalem had become once again a crossroads for pilgrims. Muslims, Christians, and Jews. From Cairo, from Aleppo, from the plains of Persia they came, walking dusty roads to touch the stones of faith. Merchants followed them, and the markets thrived. Suq al-Katanin, the cotton market, built by the Mamluks in the 14th century, opened directly onto the Haram. Beneath its colorful stalls, small cellars and storage vaults connected to older Roman-era basements. Some of these were adapted into cool chambers for keeping goods and grain, others for rest or prayer. In the faint lamplight, one could hear the sound of dripping water and the soft rustle of woven cloth. The air smelled of spices, cinnamon, myrrh, and the dust of far-off lands. The people above spoke many tongues, but below, the language was always the same. The low hum of stone, the breath of centuries. Jerusalem has never slept easily. The earth beneath it shifts, sighs, and sometimes trembles. In 1308, and again in 1346, earthquakes rippled through the hills of Palestine. Walls cracked, domes shook, and stairways split open. Many of the old tunnels collapsed. But even in disaster, the underground world adapted. The Mamluk builders descended once more, shoring up arches, refilling broken cisterns, and sealing chambers that could no longer be saved. Archaeologists today still find signs of those medieval repairs. New blocks inserted among ancient stones, their mortar mixed with lime and ash, smelling faintly of time itself. Each repair tells a story of resilience. Each rebuilt tunnel a quiet act of devotion. In those days, workers sometimes carried amulets or verses inscribed on parchment to ward off fear. For in the deep tunnels, they said, unseen winds whispered. It was not superstition. It was the breath of the city itself, moving through cracks and chambers, sighing like a ghost that never left. The Mamluk centuries gave Jerusalem a second underground life, not of conquest or secrecy, but of continuity. While empires rose and fell, the stones beneath remained loyal only to the earth. Every drop of rain that fell on the golden dome above would one day trickle down into these same hidden places, cool, dark, patient, waiting for another hand to find it. Take a slow, deep breath now. Imagine the damp scent of limestone and still water. The torchlight flickers on the wall. Far above, the call to prayer drifts faintly through the vents, and you realize you are standing in the same air breathed by countless souls, centuries apart, bound by the silence beneath Jerusalem. The 15th century waned like the last flame of an oil lamp. The world was changing beyond Jerusalem's walls, empires expanding, caravans moving, oceans being crossed. But here, the city's rhythm was slower, circular, eternal. Each ruler left his mark above, yet the heart of Jerusalem still pulsed far below the ground. When the Mamluk dynasty began to fade in the late 1400s, their builders had already shaped much of the Jerusalem we know. Their arches, schools, and fountains defined the skyline. But what they left beneath was equally enduring. A network of tunnels, drains, cisterns, and passageways that continued to serve the living. They were not ruins. They were veins. Travelers who came in those final medieval decades often spoke of this hidden life. A Franciscan pilgrim in the 1480s described descending beneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where he found chambers of great darkness, smelling of age and sanctity. Another, a Muslim scholar from Damascus, wrote of engineers entering the Haram al-Sharif through secret doors, to tend the waters and the wells that lie in the belly of the rock. They came and went unseen, servants of stone and silence. In 1517, the Ottoman Sultan Selim I marched into Jerusalem. It was a peaceful transition. No burning, no sack, no massacre. The city simply changed hands, as it had done countless times before. But with the Ottomans came a new era of stability, and for the first time in centuries, the subterranean world could rest. The Ottomans were master builders, inheritors of Byzantine and Islamic craftsmanship. They understood that the survival of a holy city depended on its water. Thus, one of their first acts was to study and restore the medieval aqueducts and cisterns. Engineers from Istanbul, Damascus, and Cairo walked through the same narrow passages that had once carried Mamluk and Ayyubid water. They repaired the Ain Silwan Channel again, cleaned the reservoirs beneath the Haram, and reopened shafts that had lain dormant since the Crusades. A report from the early 16th century mentions 37 cisterns and 7 hidden conduits within the city walls, many dating back to ancient and Saracen times. These were medieval systems, silent survivors of the Middle Ages, still catching and holding the life-giving rain. Imagine their sound. After a storm, the city above grows quiet. Down below, the echo of falling water ripples through the stone vaults. Drop by drop, the earth fills her lungs again. Though the Ottomans ruled in peace, they built upon the bones of the Middle Ages. Many of their mosques and schools rose atop older foundations. Beneath them, medieval chambers remained. In the old city, entire neighborhoods hid ancient storage cellars and passageways linking one courtyard to another. Some were used as cool shelters in the heat of summer, others as secret routes during conflict or unrest. The Haram al-Sharif, that vast sacred plateau, still guarded its hidden rooms. The so-called Solomon Stables, built and rebuilt through centuries, continued to support the platform above. During Friday prayers, thousands gathered under the open sky, unaware of the echoing silence below. The hollow space where knights had once kept horses, where Mamluks had prayed, where water still trickled between the stones. Ottoman chroniclers respected these underground sites. They called them Moxan Asrar, stores of secrets. And though many were sealed for safety, none were forgotten. Some were marked on old maps as empty squares or shaded chambers, their names lost, their memory preserved only in whispers. By the late 16th century, Jerusalem's underground was a living palimpsest, a book written over 1,000 times but never erased. The Ottomans added new pages, but beneath their ink lay the words of the Mamluks, the Ayyubids, the Crusaders, and the caliphs before them. Archaeologists in later centuries would marvel at the precision of the medieval masonry, the way blocks were cut to fit seamlessly even in total darkness, the curved channels shaped to guide water without waste, the symmetry of pillars beneath the Haram platform. Much of that skill belonged to unnamed workers, artisans who lived and died without record, yet left their fingerprints on every inch of stone. Their work endured because it was not made for glory. It was made for survival, to hold rain, to shelter pilgrims, to protect life. Even now, when one walks the tunnels beneath Jerusalem with a lamp, one can see their chiseling marks, faint, rhythmic, steady, like a heartbeat frozen in rock. The late medieval world faded quietly into the Ottoman age. But in Jerusalem, centuries blurred together like colors in lamplight. The stones did not distinguish who ruled above them, Christian or Muslim, knight or caliph. They only carried on their purpose. When Ottoman poets wrote of the city, they often spoke of her hidden heart. That heart was not the domes or towers. It was the stone beneath, where water slept and history murmured. Pilgrims who visited in the 1500s still descended into the same medieval wells, still touched the same walls worn smooth by older hands. Some prayed, some wept. All felt the same stillness, that quiet hum that seems to rise from the depths, as if the city itself were breathing. The medieval era may have ended in name, but in Jerusalem it never truly passed. It lingered in the smell of damp limestone, in the echo of the muezzin through stone shafts, in the faint shimmer of water beneath the Haram. And so, the hidden city continued, layer upon layer, faith upon faith, each leaving its breath within the rock. Now, take a slow, quiet breath. Feel that ancient air again. We stand at the meeting point between centuries, where medieval memory melts into Ottoman calm, and the earth keeps its secrets unchanged. Beneath the cool silence of the night, the stones of Jerusalem whisper, You can almost hear them if you stay still enough. The faint sigh of ancient breath, the tremor of footsteps that once hurried through corridors now sealed in shadow. Down here, in the subterranean heart of the city, the air changes. It smells faintly of lime and damp earth, but also of age, a scent that seems older than religion itself. You imagine the sound of dripping water echoing softly, each drop a measure of centuries gone. In the 10th century, travelers from faraway lands wrote of strange underground passages beneath the holy city. Some said they led to forgotten palaces. Others believed they connected to Solomon's temple itself, the place where heaven once touched the earth. Archaeologists centuries later would find fragments of truth buried in those myths. The tunnels were real, vast, deliberate, and older than anyone had imagined. One such tunnel, discovered near the western wall, stretches for hundreds of meters beneath the old city. Its stones, perfectly cut, fit together without mortar, their precision almost unsettling. The builders had shaped limestone blocks weighing tons, aligning them to form a pathway that seemed to defy time. In the flickering torchlight of medieval Jerusalem, these tunnels had a dual purpose. Some served the priests of the Second Temple, carrying water from hidden cisterns to the sacred courts. Others, more secret still, were escape routes, narrow, steep, and winding, meant for kings or priests to flee unseen should the city fall under siege. And siege came often. From the Persians to the Romans, from crusaders to caliphs, Jerusalem endured waves of conquerors. Each left their mark above ground, but below, the city beneath the city, life continued in a quiet, hidden rhythm. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the sound of sandals brushing across cool stone, the low murmur of Hebrew prayers rising from chambers hidden beneath the Temple Mount. The light of oil lamps flickers along damp walls, and the scent of olive smoke fills the narrow air. In one section of the tunnels, near what is now known as Warren's Shaft, engineers of the Iron Age carved deep into the bedrock to reach the city's most precious resource, water. This vertical shaft, over 13 meters deep, allowed ancient residents to draw from the Gihon Spring without exposing themselves to enemy archers above. By medieval times, this system was rediscovered, expanded, and used by Muslim engineers to channel water to new quarters of the city. The knowledge of hydrology, of hidden aqueducts and reservoirs, became a guarded secret, passed from builder to builder like sacred knowledge. Above ground, the old city thrived. Muezzins called for prayer, bells tolled in distant churches, and the cries of market vendors filled the air. But beneath, in the quiet dark, another Jerusalem lived. One of echoes, trickling water, and footsteps in the stone. When the Crusaders arrived in 1099, they knew little of this underworld. They were men of the sword, not the spade. Yet legends reached their ears. Whispers of the Ark of the Covenant hidden somewhere below the Temple Mount. The Knights Templar, founded soon after the conquest, took residence in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which they believed stood atop Solomon's ancient temple. And what did they do there night after night? Some say they prayed. Others believe they dug. In the stillness of the tunnels, the Templars searched, not for gold, but for relics, secrets, and symbols. Centuries later, fragments of their tools and carved crosses would be found embedded deep within the limestone walls, proof that they had indeed gone below. The earth had swallowed their footsteps, but not their legend. Imagine for a moment, a group of armored men descending a torchlit shaft, the sound of their boots echoing in the damp dark. The leader holds a parchment, an old map said to trace the sacred passages of Solomon. Their breaths are heavy, their torches hiss. One of them whispers a prayer. Down there, among dripping walls and echoing chambers, the world above ceases to exist. The layers of faith and history intertwine. Jewish, Christian, and Muslim, each adding their own chapters to this subterranean scripture. By the 12th century, Muslim scholars such as Al-Idrisi wrote about these very caverns. Some he described as paths of the jinn, others as roads of the ancients. But his notes reveal something more human, a fascination with the craftsmanship of the ancients, whose engineering remained unmatched even in his time. In later centuries, Ottoman builders would reopen many of these ancient systems to restore the city's water flow. The tunnels beneath the Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, still carried life to the fountains where pilgrims washed before prayer. It is said that the sound of rushing water beneath the Al-Aqsa courtyard could sometimes be heard faintly through the stone, like the breathing of the city itself. Every empire that ruled Jerusalem, from the Ayyubids to the Mamluks, touched these tunnels in some way. Some repaired them. Others sealed them for fear of spies and thieves. Yet none could erase them. The earth remembered. Above ground, new rulers changed flags and faiths, but below, the same stones watched quietly, unmoved by conquest. Pause for a moment. Imagine the chill of those stones against your fingertips, the faint hum of the city overhead. Muffled, distant, eternal. The secret cities beneath medieval Jerusalem were not just passages or caverns. They were arteries, carrying water, faith, and mystery through the veins of the holy city. The torches flicker as we move deeper, following the faint rhythm of dripping water and echoing boots against the stone. This is the part of the city most people never saw. The air grows heavier, the silence more complete. You can almost feel time pressing in on you, as though the centuries themselves are watching. The year is around 1119, the time when the Knights Templar have just been founded. Their headquarters rest above, in what was once the Al-Aqsa Mosque, a site they believe to be the ancient Temple of Solomon. And beneath their feet, they believe lies the key to the greatest mystery of their faith. They were not simple warriors. The early Templars were men of deep conviction, sworn to poverty and secrecy. Yet soon after settling in Jerusalem, something strange began. The monks of war stopped appearing in public for long stretches of time. The clatter of digging could sometimes be heard at night from below their quarters. Workers spoke of stone dust, of carts moving in the darkness, of ancient vaults being uncovered. What were they searching for? The answer has been debated for centuries. Some historians, cautious and precise, say the Templars were merely repairing cisterns or building storage cellars. Others, including medieval chroniclers, whisper of something else. They speak of scrolls, of hidden chambers, of the Ark of the Covenant itself, resting in silence under layers of rock. It is here, beneath the Temple Mount, that legend and archaeology blur together like smoke. Imagine now, a row of torches illuminating a newly discovered tunnel. The walls are smooth, ancient. The air is thick with dust, disturbed for the first time in 1,000 years. The men kneel, touching the carvings with gloved hands. Strange marks, Hebrew, perhaps Phoenician, decorate the blocks. One of the knights murmurs a prayer, the words lost in the echoing hollow. The place feels alive. Centuries later, explorers and scholars would rediscover some of these same tunnels. The Western Wall Tunnel, the Solomon Stables, and beneath them, chambers carved so precisely that modern tools still marvel at their perfection. One long corridor runs parallel to the Western Wall, tracing nearly the entire length of the Temple Mount. Its construction suggests an advanced understanding of weight and pressure, the kind of knowledge rarely found in the medieval world. Some sections are lined with ancient paving stones, others left raw, like wounds in the rock. Above, pilgrims pray. Below, the earth keeps its silence. When the Crusaders ruled Jerusalem, the city's spiritual gravity drew the faithful from every corner of Christendom. Pilgrims filled the streets, relic traders sold fragments of saints' bones, and scholars debated the location of biblical events. But it was the Templars who descended into the bedrock, into the realm of myth. Contemporary Arab chroniclers, such as Usama ibn Munkid, mention Christian soldiers who walked beneath the mosque like ants in their tunnels. Though he wrote with sarcasm, his words suggest awareness, that the Crusaders truly had discovered ancient networks below the city. By the mid-12th century, the Templars had grown rich and powerful, their influence stretching from Jerusalem to Paris. And many wondered, what had they found in those tunnels to change their destiny so profoundly? Some claimed it was gold. Others said it was knowledge, sacred geometry, ancient maps, or relics lost since Solomon's reign. When the Crusaders eventually fell, much of their secret work was buried once again. The Mamluks and Ottomans who followed would seal many of the entrances, fearing instability or sacrilege. But time, as it always does, preserved traces. In the 19th century, explorers such as Charles Warren and Conrad Schick descended into the same passages with ropes and lanterns, sketching what they saw by trembling light. Warren described a maze of corridors carved with purpose, and one shaft descending into darkness so deep he could hear the echo of his own heartbeat. He mapped out Warren's shaft, an engineering marvel from the 8th century BCE, rediscovered beneath the foundations of the city. Its purpose: to draw water safely during siege. Yet its design was so advanced that even Victorian engineers were astonished. And all this lay just meters beneath the streets trodden daily by merchants and pilgrims. You can almost picture it. Above ground, the cries of vendors selling figs and copper lamps, the chanting of monks drifting from church domes. Below, an entirely different world, cold, damp, eternal. Each torch flicker revealing walls cut by hands that may have built Solomon's temple itself. Let your imagination wander there. The tunnels stretch on, turning, descending, rising again. A labyrinth layered with centuries of conquest. Perhaps a crusader's cross still marks one wall, scratched in haste. Perhaps an Arabic inscription praises God for protection. Both faiths carved their hope into the same stone, one over the other, like a quiet conversation across time. When Saladin reclaimed Jerusalem in 1187, his soldiers too entered the depths. The Muslim chronicler Ibn al-Athir notes that the Franks had left strange works beneath the ground, and that engineers were sent to inspect them. Some were filled in, others repurposed. The city's lifeblood, its water channels and store vaults, continued to flow through those same ancient veins. As centuries passed, the memory of these tunnels faded from daily life. Markets rose above them. Mosques and churches anchored themselves upon their roofs. Yet beneath the old city's narrow lanes, beneath the weight of faith and time, the secret cities endured. Pause here. Take a deep breath. Listen to the imagined drip of water echoing through those caverns. The air cools. Torches hiss. The sound of the world above fades into a distant hum. You are now deep within medieval Jerusalem, between history and myth, between stone and silence. The Crusaders are gone now. The banners of the cross have fallen, and the call to prayer once again echoes over the city's golden hills. The year is 1187, and Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, whom the West calls Saladin, stands upon the walls of Jerusalem. The city lies quiet beneath him, wounded, weary, but still breathing. The sun dips low, brushing the domes with amber light. Below, in the labyrinth of stone, the secret heart of Jerusalem still pulses. The same tunnels that once hid knights and relics now whisper to new rulers, men of science, architects, engineers, and believers. Saladin was not a destroyer. He was a restorer. After nearly 90 years of Crusader occupation, his vision was not of revenge, but of cleansing and renewal. The city was to be purified, repaired, and reconnected to its sacred past. So the work began. In the shadows beneath the Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, Muslim engineers descended with torches and measuring rods. The tunnels were inspected, mapped, and in some cases reopened. Many of them dated back to the Herodian period, others even earlier, carved in the age of prophets and kings. It is said that the workers spoke softly as they dug, unwilling to raise their voices in such holy ground. Each echo in those corridors felt like a prayer. Saladin ordered the cleansing of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, both of which had been converted into churches by the Crusaders. Beneath them lay crypts, chambers, and sealed cisterns. Some were filled with rubble, others with silence. But the builders who worked there knew they were walking through layers of history, through the bones of prophets and the stones of kings. Imagine it now. A torch's glow reflected in a pool of still water. The scent of damp limestone and oil smoke. The quiet murmur of Arabic verses drifting through the caverns. Under Saladin's orders, the city's water systems were restored. The aqueduct from the pools of Solomon, south of Bethlehem, was cleaned and reconnected, feeding reservoirs under the Temple Mount. These cisterns, vast and arched, could store thousands of cubic meters of water. Some were old Roman constructions, Others were newly carved extensions, lined with plaster and stone. The Ayyubid engineers marked their work with subtle signs, geometric patterns and calligraphic inscriptions praising God for knowledge and skill. A few of these marks still remain, faint and elegant, hidden in the dark. The hum of their tools, the scrape of chisels against stone, these were the sounds of rebirth. Above ground, Jerusalem was changing too. Schools and hospitals rose again, the marketplaces revived, and pilgrims returned. But it was beneath, in the underbelly of the city, that Saladin's vision of endurance truly took form. The tunnels were not just relics. They were arteries, carrying water, life, and stability to the city above. And yet, there was always a sense of mystery in their depth. Many believed that deep below the dome of the rock, somewhere in the heart of Mount Moriah, lay the remains of the Temple of Solomon, perhaps even the Ark itself. Saladin did not indulge such superstitions, yet he respected their power. He ensured that no reckless digging disturbed those lower chambers again. For the Ayyubids, these subterranean passages were sacred. They connected not only parts of the city, but also its faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, bound together in layers of stone. Centuries later, when chroniclers described this period, they wrote of Saladin's mercy and wisdom. But beneath those virtues lay another legacy, one of preservation. By protecting the structures below, he safeguarded a memory of the ancient world that would have otherwise been lost forever. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture the flickering light of 100 oil lamps casting shadows along the carved walls. The faint murmur of running water flows through narrow stone conduits. A guard, wrapped in a linen robe, carries a torch through the archway, his reflection rippling in the cistern's surface. The air is cool, heavy with the scent of dust and sanctity. This was medieval Jerusalem's living core, unseen yet vital. By the 13th century, after Saladin's death, the city passed through the hands of his heirs and eventually the Mamluks. They too honored the old systems beneath the city. The Mamluk sultans were builders by nature, proud of their craftsmanship and their devotion. They extended the underground channels, strengthened old reservoirs, and carved new tunnels linking mosques, madrasas, and fountains. Each ruler added his mark to the living labyrinth below. In those days, the people of Jerusalem rarely saw what lay beneath their feet. They knew of wells, of cisterns, of springs, but not of the vast network that connected them. Only the engineers and custodians, the muwakkits and waqf overseers, held the maps and keys. To them, the tunnels were sacred trusts, vessels of purity and protection. If you stand in the city today, you can still feel their presence. Hidden behind thick walls, under shop floors, beneath the courtyards of ancient houses. The stones remember. The air remembers. Every echo carries the breath of 1,000 years. So now let the sounds fade. The clang of hammers becomes the whisper of time. The echo of prayers turns into a soft hum in your ears. And the city above begins to drift, leaving you alone in the cool, eternal dark beneath Jerusalem. Here where faith, science, and stone meet, the true secret cities still sleep. The centuries flow like water through the veins of time. Jerusalem changes rulers again and again, but the stones beneath remain unmoved, patient, listening. It is now the Mamluk era, the 13th and 14th centuries. The Crusaders are a fading memory, their strongholds broken and reclaimed. The city, though weary, stands proud once more under the crescent banner. Above, the Mamluks raise new schools and mosques, elegant arches, marble fountains, and courtyards shaded with fig trees. Below, the ancient tunnels stir again. The Mamluks, like the Ayyubids before them, understood the importance of the underground. They were builders and planners, soldiers with the minds of engineers. In the heart of Jerusalem, they reopened old cisterns, repaired conduits that had carried water since the days of Solomon, and dug new passages through the limestone bedrock. The goal was always life. Water for the worshippers, water for the poor, water for the city that refused to die. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the rhythmic scrape of metal on stone, the flicker of oil lamps casting trembling circles of light. Workers whisper the name of God as they dig, each stroke of the chisel echoing softly in the still air. The Mamluks extended the network of qanats, underground water channels, that wound beneath the Haram al-Sharif. They cleaned the great cisterns hidden under the courtyards, lined them with fresh plaster, and sealed the cracks that centuries had opened. One cistern beneath the dome of the rock was so vast that its vaulted ceiling seemed like the inside of a cathedral. Its still water reflected the lamplight like a mirror. Standing there, one might forget whether they were above or below the earth, whether the dome overhead was of gold or of stone. These were not mere works of utility. They were acts of devotion. In Islam, the provision of clean water is a sacred duty, Sadaqah Yariyah, a charity that flows eternally. So every drop drawn from those secret veins was, in their eyes, a prayer made liquid. Above ground, the city's beauty grew. The Chain Gate, the Cotton Market Gate, the sables, fountains, that still line the old city walls, all were connected to the waters below. When a pilgrim washed his hands before prayer at Al-Aqsa, the cool water that touched his skin had journeyed through a labyrinth carved by hands centuries apart. And still the tunnels whispered. There were rumors among the people, stories of hidden chambers where the early kings had stored their treasures, or where prophets once prayed in secret. At night, some said, you could hear faint chants beneath the stones, as though the old priests still walked their unseen corridors. The scholars dismissed such tales, but they never denied the mystery. Jerusalem, after all, was not like other cities. Here every layer was sacred. Every grain of dust carried a name. By the 15th century, the Mamluk dynasty began to fade, and the Ottoman Empire rose in its place. The new rulers, pragmatic and visionary, sought to modernize while preserving what came before. Under Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, great renovations began. The city walls were rebuilt, the fountains renewed, and the underground system surveyed once more. It was during this time that the Ottomans uncovered parts of the ancient aqueduct leading from the pools of Solomon near Bethlehem. The same lifeline that had served kings, prophets, crusaders, and caliphs. It still pulsed beneath the land. Engineers traced its course, restoring collapsed sections, building new sluices and drains. They recorded their work in careful Arabic calligraphy on marble plaques, many of which still survive today. Down below, the tunnels were quiet but alive, their silence filled with the hum of flowing water. Imagine standing there now. The walls are damp, the air thick with minerals. Your footsteps echo softly as you walk beside an underground stream, its surface black and glassy in the faint lamplight. Above you, Jerusalem sleeps, its mosques, churches, and homes unaware that life still flows beneath them, as it has for 3,000 years. For the Ottomans, the underworld of Jerusalem was not a place of fear. It was a monument, a testimony to endurance and divine design. They left many of the older passages untouched, sealing only those that threatened collapse. But travelers who came from Europe, pilgrims, soldiers, and later archaeologists, wrote of their astonishment. They had never imagined that beneath the holy stones stretched an entire hidden city, an invisible reflection of the one above. One 16th century visitor described Jerusalem as a city of shadows upon a city of light. He had seen, he said, doorways that opened into the earth like mouths, and tunnels that ran as veins through the heart of the hill. He was not wrong. For even as empires rose and fell, those secret arteries endured, carrying whispers of the past, water for the living, and stories for those who dared to listen. Now take a long, deep breath. Feel the cool dampness of the air, the way sound fades into stone. Imagine your footsteps slowing, your thoughts quieting, your senses softening to the rhythm of the underground. The world above fades, but the ancient city below remains, calm, eternal, breathing softly beneath the sacred soil of Jerusalem. The deeper one goes beneath the old stone streets of Jerusalem, the more the air changes. It thickens, cool and damp, and carries with it the scent of centuries. The muffled hum of life above becomes distant, replaced by the slow drip of water, the rustle of unseen insects, and the echo of your own heartbeat against the carved limestone walls. This was not merely a hidden layer of the city, it was an entire world, a reflection of Jerusalem's spirit. Restless, layered, and eternal. In the 12th century, during the height of Crusader rule, engineers and monks worked tirelessly in these subterranean corridors. Some were constructing cisterns to store the city's lifeblood, water, while others sought secret routes to move soldiers or relics unseen by the watchful eyes of rivals. The Crusader engineers were remarkable craftsmen. Their stonework still holds, their arches still stand, supporting the weight of modern buildings above. Torches once flickered here, their light casting shadows that danced on walls carved with Latin inscriptions and the faint outlines of crosses. In these shadows, faith and fear mingled. Jerusalem was a city that belonged to everyone and to no one at all. One of the most fascinating discoveries of modern archaeology was the Hezekiah's Tunnel, a feat of ancient engineering rediscovered in the medieval period. It was said to have been dug nearly a millennium earlier, under King Hezekiah's orders, to bring water from the Gihon spring to the Pool of Siloam. During medieval times, it became a hidden route, used not only by locals but by crusaders who adapted its darkness for their own secret purposes. Imagine monks carrying lanterns through waist-deep water, chanting prayers that echoed in the stone chamber, the sound both beautiful and eerie. And yet, the tunnel was not alone. Beneath the Temple Mount lay other passages, some real, others imagined. Legends told of hidden chambers where Solomon's treasures had been buried, or where the Ark of the Covenant itself was once kept. The Knights Templar, whose headquarters stood on the mount itself, were said to have found something there, something powerful enough to make kings fear them and the church whisper against them. It's hard to separate myth from history, but archaeologists have found evidence of Templar excavation beneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque, narrow shafts and carved chambers dating back to their time in Jerusalem. Whether they found relics or not we cannot say. But they believed that they were walking where ancient kings once stood. Above these silent tunnels, life thrived in contradiction. The medieval city of Jerusalem was a maze of markets, workshops, and prayer halls. From the Christian quarter to the Muslim quarter, from Armenian cloisters to Jewish courtyards, the surface world bustled with devotion and commerce. And yet, beneath all this, people still descended into the quiet dark, to store, to hide, to worship, or simply to survive. One could hear the echo of sandals on the steps leading down to the Pool of Bethesda, where pilgrims once believed an angel stirred the waters to heal the sick. By candlelight, the sick were brought down, bathed, and prayed over. The sound of their whispered pleas for mercy must have drifted upward through cracks in the street, mingling with the chants of priests and the cries of merchants above. In another chamber, near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, archaeologists have found layers of rock-cut tombs reused by medieval monks. They converted old burial sites into chapels, carving altars directly into the stone. It's said that in the quiet hours before dawn, monks would come here, their chants slow and low, vibrating softly against the damp walls. A candle flame would flicker and die, and another would be lit, an endless cycle of light and shadow, of prayer and silence. If you were to stand there, you might hear water dripping slowly, a rhythm as steady as time. You might feel a faint breeze, cool and ancient, brushing against your face. You might even imagine that the city above is breathing, its heart deep below, pulsing in these hidden veins of rock and faith. During the later centuries of medieval rule, after Saladin reclaimed the city, the underground continued to serve its quiet purpose. Muslim engineers repaired the old Roman aqueducts, and Sufi mystics turned some of the chambers into secluded places of meditation. In the silence of those caves, far from the noise of the markets, they recited the names of God, one after another, until even their breath became part of the prayer. The light would fall softly through a small stone opening, creating a halo on the floor where the dust shimmered like gold. Outside, Jerusalem's politics and armies clashed endlessly. But beneath, the air was still, the eternal sanctuary of stone and water. For centuries, these passages were forgotten again, their entrances sealed or buried by earthquakes and time. Only faint legends remained. Of knights who vanished beneath the Temple Mount, of secret Jewish schools hidden under the old city, of Christian relics entombed forever in darkness. In the late 19th century, Explorers rediscovered many of these lost paths. Charles Warren, a British officer and early archaeologist, was among the first to map them carefully. Crawling through narrow shafts with candlelight, he noted the ancient steps, the smooth walls cut by hand, and the faint carvings left by medieval pilgrims. Even he described the sensation of hearing the city above. Horses trotting, market cries, the hum of prayers, while his boots stood in water that had not seen the sun for 1,000 years. "It is," he wrote, "as though Jerusalem lives above a mirror of itself, an echoing twin of shadow and silence." The tunnels beneath medieval Jerusalem were not just a marvel of engineering. They were a testament to endurance, to the city's refusal to die, even when conquered, burned, or forgotten. Each conqueror claimed the surface, but the soul of Jerusalem remained below. The torches hissed in the damp, whispering corridors beneath the Temple Mount. The year was 1129. The poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, later known as the Knights Templar, had made their headquarters within the ancient platform once believed to house Solomon's temple. By day, they patrolled the streets above, armored and solemn. But by night a different labor began. Beneath the marble floors of their chapel, men worked by lantern light, digging through the layers of dust and stone that time had forgotten. The chronicles speak faintly of this, of men who descended and never returned. They said they were seeking relics, but perhaps they were seeking something deeper. Knowledge, a connection to the divine, or a secret so powerful that it could change the world. The Templars were not mere warriors. Many were trained builders and scholars. They knew how to read ancient inscriptions, how to measure by the stars, and how to carve through bedrock without collapse. In silence, they lowered themselves through narrow shafts, the sound of pickaxes muffled by the weight of earth above. Sometimes they found old Roman stones, perfectly cut, still holding faint traces of frescoes. At other times, they came upon sealed chambers filled with stale air and mystery. In one, it was said, they found amphorae, jars of oil still corked, their contents turned to resin. In another, they found a stairway that descended further than their courage could follow. Whispers later grew into legend, that they discovered the foundations of the first temple, and within them a hidden vault. Whether this was truth or myth, no record survived. The Templars never spoke of what they found. But after their years in Jerusalem, their wealth and influence grew beyond comprehension. Some said their power was not only of gold, but of secret knowledge unearthed beneath the holy city. Above, Jerusalem glowed with a strange duality. On the surface, prayers rose from every corner. The muezzin's call, the toll of church bells, the hum of Jewish chants near the western wall. But below, the earth held its own religion, one of shadows, echoes, and the steady dripping of unseen waters. The great cisterns of Jerusalem were among its most vital features. In the dry months they were life itself. Beneath the Haram al-Sharif lay a vast reservoir known as the Sea, so large that it could hold millions of gallons of rainwater. The Crusaders renamed it the Great Sea, and pilgrims would descend to its cool depths, marveling at the perfect symmetry of its arches. The light of their candles shimmered upon the surface, turning the water into liquid gold. In those moments, perhaps they felt what countless generations before them had felt, the humbling presence of time. The stones they touched had been cut in the days of Herod, or perhaps Solomon. Their hands rested where prophets once prayed. And yet, even as the Templars dug deeper, fate was shifting above. By 1187, the banners of the Crusaders no longer waved over Jerusalem. Salah ad-Din Saladin had retaken the city after the Battle of Hattin. His entry was not one of fire and blood, but of solemn grace. He ordered that the Christian holy sites be preserved, and the Dome of the Rock be cleansed and rededicated as a Muslim sanctuary once more. But beneath the surface, the tunnels and cisterns remained untouched, silent witnesses to another age. The Muslim engineers who examined them marveled at their precision. Some were reinforced with Byzantine arches. Others, they realized, extended under entire streets. Saladin's men repaired the aqueducts leading from the south, from Solomon's pools. restoring water to flow again through the ancient channels. Imagine for a moment the sound of that first rush of water, echoing through stone corridors silent for decades. The splash against the cistern's wall, the trickle that became a steady stream, the rising scent of wet limestone. It was as though the city exhaled, alive again. Sufi mystics later found solace in these same depths. Some chambers, left forgotten by the Crusaders, became their retreats. In the dim candlelight, the mystics would sit cross-legged on cool stone floors, whispering the dhikr, the remembrance of God, their breaths merging with the quiet pulse of the underground world. A traveler in the 13th century wrote of one such place. Beneath the noble sanctuary lies a chamber where the sound of one's voice returns thrice, as if the angels themselves repeat it. There, a man may forget the world and remember only the eternal. That chamber is believed to be near what is now called the Well of Souls, an ancient hollow beneath the rock, surrounded by countless legends. Some claimed it was the place where the spirits of the righteous waited for judgment. Others said it was the entrance to the underworld. In truth, it was likely a natural cavity, used since ancient times for ritual or prayer. But the feeling it inspires, that sense of quiet eternity, is no illusion. Even today, when one stands there, the air feels older than history itself. Through the centuries that followed, layer upon layer was added above these tunnels. Ottoman builders laid new pavements. Mamluk sultans raised mosques and schools. Yet the underground remained nearly the same, eternal, immune to empire and change. The whispers of the Templars faded into myth. The aqueducts continued to flow. The cisterns filled and emptied with the rain. Beneath Jerusalem, time slowed, pooled, and waited. And if you listen closely, even now, you might still hear the faint rhythm of pickaxes from ages past, or the echo of footsteps vanishing into the dark. The centuries rolled on, and yet, beneath the ancient stones of Jerusalem, the silence endured. Above ground, kings rose and fell. Empires traded banners, and languages shifted like the wind. But below, the air still smelled of dust, lime, and time itself. By the 14th century, Jerusalem had fallen under Mamluk rule. The city's skyline changed again. Tall minarets pierced the horizon, caravanserais filled with travelers from Damascus and Cairo, and scholars filled the madrasas with a quiet rustle of parchment. Yet beneath the noise of the markets, the footsteps of donkeys and pilgrims, the underworld of Jerusalem still breathed, unseen but essential. The Mamluks were master builders, disciplined and deeply spiritual. They understood the fragile balance between the sacred and the practical. The wells and cisterns, neglected during wars, were repaired and expanded. New conduits were dug with careful precision, reconnecting the city's arteries of stone and water. Some of these restorations, according to Arabic chronicles, were done in near silence, at night, by candlelight. The workers feared collapsing ancient tunnels whose makers were unknown. The engineers drew their plans by the flicker of oil lamps, tracing lines over maps already yellowed by age. When they descended below the Haram al-Sharif, they found walls of massive stone, fitted so perfectly that a knife blade could not slip between them. They whispered that these must be the works of Solomon himself. They dared not disturb them. In other parts of the city, deeper chambers were found. Some were repurposed as cool storerooms for grains and wine. Others became secret prisons. A few, it is said, were used for quiet gatherings of mystics who believed that beneath the earth lay the truest silence, the silence closest to God. There is one haunting record from this era. A Sufi scholar named Ahmad al-Qudsi wrote of a city of shadows beneath Jerusalem. In his writings, he describes narrow corridors where the air is old and the stones weep with water, and a chamber where voices return not as echoes, but as whispers of remembrance. He claimed that in one of those chambers, he found a stone basin filled with water that reflected no light, no candle, no flame. When I placed my hand upon it, he wrote, the water was warm though the air was cold. I felt it pulse, as if the city's heart beat beneath my palm. Was it poetic imagination? Perhaps, but it fits what we know. that Jerusalem's underworld is a maze of water channels and echoing hollows, where acoustics play strange tricks on the mind. By the 15th century, the old Crusader passages had faded from memory. Their entrances were sealed by earthquakes, floods, and the rebuilding of streets. Yet, in quiet corners of the city, small doorways remained, some beneath churches, others hidden in courtyards, leading to narrow stairs that spiraled down into darkness. It was here that Christian monks sometimes descended to find solitude. In these caves they could not see the sunlight, but they could hear it, the faint tremor of footsteps above, the creak of wooden carts, the distant bells of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The air in these chambers was thick and still. A candle would flicker weakly, its flame trembling as if in prayer. Dust motes drifted like spirits, catching the faint light before vanishing into the dark. The monks called these places refugia animae, refuges of the soul. And indeed, there was something otherworldly about them. By the time the Ottomans arrived in 1517, the city had aged like a palimpsest, each ruler writing his story upon the old. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, whose walls still encircle the old city today, took a special interest in Jerusalem's foundations. He ordered that the city's water systems be restored, the ancient pools cleaned, and the aqueducts reopened. His architects and engineers descended once more into the same tunnels Hezekiah's men had carved, the same cisterns the Crusaders had used, the same chambers where Sufi mystics had prayed. Imagine it. Centuries of dust falling from the ceiling as the first torches were lit again, revealing walls glistening with moisture, the smell of damp earth rushing upward. The engineers moved slowly, whispering to one another, careful not to disturb the delicate structures that had survived war, fire, and time. It is said that in one of these cisterns they found a lamp, made of bronze encrusted with lime and soot, still holding a trace of oil that, when touched, left a faint shimmer on their fingers. They left it there as a token of reverence. During Suleiman's reign, many of the visible entrances to these underground passages were sealed once more, either to prevent collapse or to keep them sacred. But their presence never truly vanished. Locals still spoke of them in hushed tones. Tunnels that led from the Haram to the Mount of Olives, or from the Citadel to the Holy Sepulchre. Some said that when the muezzin called for prayer before dawn, his voice would echo strangely beneath the streets, resonating through old stone corridors unseen by any living soul. Centuries later, travelers from Europe, pilgrims, explorers, and dreamers, would hear these same stories and come searching for the hidden Jerusalem. Some would find fragments of it, a half-buried stairway, a sealed archway behind a market wall, or the mouth of a tunnel beneath an olive tree. Each discovery was like a heartbeat, faint but steady. Because though cities can crumble and rebuild, Jerusalem's soul, its underground twin, endures, holding the memory of all who have walked above it. By the time the 19th century dawned, the old world had already begun to stir again. Steamships brought travelers to Palestine, cameras began to capture moments of stone and shadow, and a new breed of explorers, part archaeologist, part dreamer, arrived in Jerusalem with notebooks and lanterns in hand. They came seeking the city of the Bible. But what they found was something far older, and far stranger. Jerusalem, in those years, still slept beneath a crust of centuries. Dust filled the air, narrow streets wound through layers of forgotten masonry, and beneath every building there seemed to lie another. To walk through the city was to tread upon the bones of ages. Among these early explorers was Charles Warren, a British officer and surveyor of almost reckless curiosity. It was the 1860s when he first descended into the darkness beneath the city walls. His only tools were rope ladders, candles, and determination. His mission, commissioned by the Palestine Exploration Fund, was to map the foundations of the Temple Mount, but what he found instead was the heartbeat of the buried Jerusalem. Warren's men lowered him through a narrow shaft near the Gihon Spring, a place known in ancient texts, but never truly seen for centuries. The air was thick and damp, and the flicker of the candle revealed carvings on the wall. Chisel marks, deep and deliberate, made by hands long vanished. As he moved deeper, his boots struck water. The echo of his movement rippled through the blackness. He had found what later became known as Warren's Shaft, an ancient tunnel possibly dating back to the time of King David, used for drawing water secretly during sieges. But what made it extraordinary was not only its age. It was the fact that the same passage had likely been reused, century after century, by medieval engineers, monks, and soldiers who had known its secret path. When Warren climbed out again, soaked and trembling, he wrote in his journal, "The air below is heavy, as if weighted by the prayers of 1,000 years." The 19th century was an age of rediscovery. As the Ottoman Empire loosened its hold on the region, Western explorers, scholars, and clergy began to peel back the layers of Jerusalem's mystery. They opened the sealed cisterns, measured the hidden stairways, and carefully traced the alignment of subterranean arches beneath the Haram al-Sharif. Each new discovery deepened the sense that Jerusalem was not one city, but many, stacked upon each other like forgotten pages of a vast book. At the same time, local residents shared their own stories. The Muslim caretakers of the noble sanctuary spoke of wells that had no bottom, and tunnels that whispered when the wind blew. Jewish families in the Old City told of ancient prayer chambers hidden beneath their homes, small stone rooms lit only by olive lamps, where their ancestors once sought refuge from persecution. And Christian monks, especially those guarding the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, spoke of catacombs and hidden corridors that linked one chapel to another, a labyrinth meant to protect pilgrims in times of danger. Many of these tales were dismissed as superstition, until explorers began finding proof. One evening in 1867, Warren's team uncovered a sealed archway beneath the city's northeastern quarter. Behind it lay a vast cistern, so large that when they lowered a lantern, its reflection danced upon the water as though upon a mirror. The surface was perfectly still, undisturbed by wind or sound. In the faint glow, they saw the curvature of ancient pillars supporting a dome of stone. The air smelled faintly of lime and moss. And the silence. The silence was absolute. It was as if the city above did not exist. When they later compared their measurements, they realized that the cistern aligned perfectly with known Crusader constructions, suggesting that this reservoir, built perhaps 1,000 years earlier, had been used and maintained by the knights who once ruled the city. The same water that had quenched Roman soldiers and Hebrew kings had also filled the cups of the Crusaders and later, the Mamluks. Time, it seemed, flowed like water through the same channels, endlessly recirculating. Other explorers followed. Konrad Schick, a German architect and theologian who lived in Jerusalem for decades, became fascinated by its subterranean life. He documented secret vaults, ancient steps, and buried arches beneath nearly every part of the old city. He drew them with patient precision, careful lines annotated in soft ink, preserving what the centuries threatened to erase. Schick once wrote, "It is a strange thing to dwell in a city where the earth beneath your feet remembers more than the people above." His words carried truth. Beneath every courtyard, under every church and mosque, beneath even the busy markets where merchants called and children played, lay another Jerusalem, silent, forgotten, breathing slowly in the dark. Sometimes the explorers heard things, faint echoes that made the hair rise on their necks, a soft tapping that seemed to move from wall to wall, a gust of air that came from nowhere, a low murmur that could not be explained by wind or water. One account tells of a worker who, while lowering his lamp into a newly opened shaft near the Pool of Siloam, saw what he described as a chamber filled with mist, where faint lights danced like stars. When he climbed down, the mist had vanished, and the chamber was empty. Whether it was a trick of light or something else he could never say. But he never returned underground again. To this day, many of Warren's and Schick's sketches remain some of the most detailed records of Jerusalem's subterranean world. Later archaeologists, using modern equipment, would confirm that much of what they found was true. The tunnels, the shafts, the great cisterns, even the faint alignment of passages that seemed to reach toward the Mount of Olives. The explorers of the 19th century had, without realizing it, walked the same paths that medieval monks, Templar knights, and Muslim engineers had walked centuries before. The candles had changed hands, but the darkness was the same. And deep below the living city, time remained perfectly still, heavy, eternal, and listening. The new century crept into Jerusalem almost unnoticed. Tramlines appeared, wires hummed overhead. Soldiers from empires far away patrolled streets that once echoed only with sandals and prayer. Yet, beneath all that change, the old veins of the city remained undisturbed. They waited, as they always had, for someone patient enough to listen. When the British Mandate began in 1917, archaeology became a discipline rather than an adventure. The men and women who came to Jerusalem brought not only candles but compasses, measuring rods, and careful journals. Among them was a quiet engineer named R.A. Stuart McAllister, a scholar with steady hands and a reverent voice. He walked the same path Charles Warren had taken half a century earlier, lowering himself into shafts that still smelled of wet limestone and olive oil smoke. McAllister described it simply: "Down there is no sound except your own breath returning to you." He and his team mapped the Hezekiah Tunnel with lanterns and measuring string, recording its every curve and mark by hand. When they followed the stream to the Pool of Siloam, they found traces of medieval plaster still clinging to the walls, the same lime that Mamluk builders had smoothed centuries before to keep the water pure. On the surface, Jerusalem grew noisy. Motorcars rattled through the Jaffa Gate. Vendors called beneath British banners. Pilgrims came by train instead of camel. But those who ventured below found a different city, a city that belonged to no nation, no empire, only to time itself. After the Second World War, archaeologists returned with electric lights and cameras. The pale glow revealed details that had never been seen before: Greek graffiti carved by Byzantine pilgrims, crosses etched by Crusader hands, Arabic inscriptions asking for mercy from the Most High. The walls of the underground were a palimpsest of faiths: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam woven together in stone. During the 1950s and 1960s, Israeli and Jordanian teams worked from opposite sides of a divided city. Each side dug where it could, often within the cool darkness of ancient cisterns now filled with rubble. In 1967, after the Six-Day War, Jerusalem was reunited under one administration, and with that came a wave of new exploration. Beneath the Western Wall, a narrow passage was cleared, a corridor that ran for hundreds of meters along the foundations of Herod's temple platform. Workers moved carefully, their tools muted by cloth to avoid disturbing the stones. They discovered massive blocks, each larger than a locomotive, set with perfect precision. Some believe the medieval masons of the Mamluk period had entered this same passage, reusing it as a watercourse or storage chamber. As modern lights flickered across the walls, the air shifted, and for a moment, it was as though the centuries collapsed. You could almost hear the echo of a Templar's step, a monk's chant, a mason's hammer. By the 1970s, archaeologists began to speak openly of the underground Jerusalem, a network not of myth, but of stone. Scholars traced how each empire had inherited and reused the same spaces. The Romans had cut the first drains. The Byzantines turned them into chapels. The Crusaders expanded them into armories. The Mamluks and Ottomans turned them into cisterns and wells. The same arches had borne the weight of temples, churches, and mosques in succession. In the quiet of those tunnels, it was impossible to feel hatred. The air was too old, too tired of division. Down there, faith and history mingled like the water that still dripped from the ceiling into ancient pools. One archaeologist described a moment deep under the Via Dolorosa, where his flashlight fell upon a series of handprints pressed into wet plaster hundreds of years old. They were small, perhaps a child's, forever embedded beside the marks of the builders. "The whole city," he whispered, "rests on touch." In the decades that followed, excavations became tighter regulated. Modern Jerusalem was crowded, fragile. To dig too far was to risk disturbing both stone and spirit. Archaeologists used ground-penetrating radar, tiny cameras, and infrared sensors to see what they could not reach. What they found was astonishing. Not only tunnels and water systems but chambers unknown to any chronicle, their walls still coated with medieval plaster and smoke. Each discovery was handled with care, sometimes even with prayer. In the quiet below, the scientists lowered their voices and moved slowly, as if stepping through a cathedral. Today, guided tours lead small groups through some of these tunnels. Electric lamps glow softly against ancient walls, and the guides speak in hushed tones, as though still afraid to wake the past. You can hear the same sounds that filled these passages 1,000 years ago. The steady drip of water, the faint thud of footsteps, the quiet hum of your own breathing. And if you pause and listen, really listen, you might feel what every traveler through these depths has felt. That beneath Jerusalem's stone and dust beats a living heart, slow, ancient, and patient, because the secret cities were never lost. They were simply waiting for the world to remember them. The 21st century dawned softly over Jerusalem. Golden light spilled across the stones, catching on domes, towers, and telephone wires. Above ground, the city buzzed with traffic and prayer. Below ground, silence ruled. The same cool, patient silence that had endured for 3,000 years. By the early 2000s, archaeologists had become something new. Guardians rather than mere explorers. Every tunnel, every arch, every worn step beneath the old city was now part of a living archive. Digging recklessly could fracture both history and harmony. So they began to listen not only to the stone but to each other. Teams from Israel, Palestine, Europe, and America met in narrow corridors deep beneath the Western Wall, sharing instruments and maps. The flicker of their LED lamps replaced the oil lamps of McAllister and Warren, yet their goal remained the same: to trace the veins of Jerusalem's heart. One archaeologist, Dr. Ronnie Reich, described the feeling perfectly. You are walking in the dark with history brushing your shoulder. His team worked to stabilize the City of David tunnels, some collapsing, others flooded. Engineers installed discrete supports, using materials that would not harm the original rock. The goal was not to rebuild, but to preserve, to let the ancient air breathe safely. Under the Damascus Gate, another group discovered a forgotten Mamluk-era aqueduct, filled with dust and coins. When they cleared the passage, they found faint red patterns on the ceiling, traces of paint from medieval masons, likely applied for ritual protection. To touch it was to touch a prayer older than language. Tourists today walk those same paths, guided by low lights and soft narrations. The hum of modern ventilation mingles with the dripping of ancient water. People from every nation, every faith, move shoulder to shoulder in quiet awe. Some hold cameras, others simply hold their breath. Meanwhile, on the surface, archaeologists study what they cannot reach. Drones scan rooftops. Radar peels away layers of earth like pages in a book. When a new cavity appears on the monitor, the team marks it, not to dig but to protect. Jerusalem's underground world is fragile, webbed like coral. One careless move above can break a chamber below. Yet even with caution, discoveries continue. In 2017, workers repairing a sewer line near the Temple Mount broke into a void, a stone chamber sealed for centuries. Inside lay remnants of a medieval marketplace. Clay lamps, rusted keys, fragments of a bronze scale, and a single perfectly preserved glass bead. The air smelled of time and dust. One of the workers, overcome by silence, whispered, "It feels like they just left." That moment captured what modern archaeology has become. Not a conquest of ruins, but a conversation with them. Each stone speaks, if one listens closely enough. Elsewhere, digital preservation teams from Italy and Japan arrived with 3D scanners. They crawled through the tunnels, recording every ripple of rock and every chisel mark. Their data formed virtual replicas so precise that even if the real tunnels were ever sealed or damaged, the digital ghosts would survive. For the first time, the hidden Jerusalem was not only mapped, it was immortalized. Beneath the Al-Aqsa compound, sensors now monitor humidity and temperature, ensuring that no changes harm the old cisterns. In the Western Wall tunnels, motion detectors track tiny vibrations. Even footsteps are measured to guard against erosion. What once echoed with swords and shouts now hums quietly with technology. And still the past breathes. When archaeologists pause their work, lights dim and machines fall silent. The sound that fills the tunnels then is always the same. The steady drip of water, the soft thrum of life moving somewhere far above. That rhythm hasn't changed since the days of the Crusaders or the Mamluks. It is the heartbeat of the city itself. Visitors often say the air below feels different, thicker, older, alive. Some claim to smell traces of incense or smoke. Perhaps they do. Scent lingers where faith has burned for centuries. One guide likes to tell his group to close their eyes and listen. Every drop, he says softly, is history returning to the earth. Modern Jerusalem, for all its noise and light, depends on those silent spaces. The ancient tunnels absorb vibration, channel rainwater, and even stabilize foundations. In a way, the medieval engineers who built them still protect the living city. Sometimes, archaeologists find signs left by those old builders, initials scratched into plaster, small crosses, or a verse from the Quran. They are signatures of faith, fragments of identity whispered into stone. They remind us that these tunnels were never meant to be forgotten. They were meant to endure. In the coming decades, the work will continue. Slowly, carefully, respectfully. The goal is not to uncover every secret. Some mysteries deserve their sleep. What matters is balance. Between discovery and preservation, between reverence and curiosity. Because to walk through the underground Jerusalem is not to travel through time. It is to stand inside it. The walls are calendars, the echoes are prayers, the dust is memory. And when you finally emerge, blinking into the sunlight of the modern city, the hum of traffic sounds almost foreign. Too fast, too loud. You look back at the ground beneath your feet and realize something quietly profound. The city you walk upon is only half of Jerusalem. The rest, the deeper, older half, is still breathing below, patiently waiting for the next whisperer to listen. Close your eyes for a moment. And listen. Not to the footsteps above, but to the faint murmurs below, the kind that rise from stone. Because beneath Jerusalem's bright courtyards and crowded alleys once lived people, not kings or crusaders, but laborers, masons, torchbearers, and dreamers who built the invisible bones of the city. Their names rarely appear in chronicles, but their fingerprints are still pressed into the lime plaster of ancient tunnels. In the early medieval centuries, long before electric lamps, torchlight was the only guide through the dark. Builders descended into newly dug shafts carrying resin-soaked reeds that smoked thick and sweet. The air below was heavy, humid, echoing with slow hammers and whispered prayers. Many of these men came from nearby villages, Arabs, Jews, Armenians, Greeks, drawn by the promise of steady work. They were craftsmen who knew stone the way a musician knows sound. They understood how limestone cracked, how water seeped, how tunnels should breathe. When they dug the aqueducts beneath the Haram al-Sharif, they followed the slope of the land by instinct. No compasses, no blueprints. Only the memory of their hands. Each strike of the chisel was measured not by sight, but by echo. A short echo meant solid rock. A long one meant hollow space. The tunnels they built carried water to the city's cisterns and fountains, lifelines for the living Jerusalem above. Some aqueducts were carved so smoothly that centuries later, British engineers would marvel at their precision. Yet the men who shaped them vanished into silence, their names replaced by titles like Anonymous Mamluk Mason, or Unknown Builder of the Western Wall Passage. Archaeologists have found traces of their daily lives. A fragment of a cup, a bone comb, a coin dropped in the mud. These small things whisper louder than chronicles. One cup bears a faint inscription in Arabic. Ya Allah, make the stone soft beneath my hand. Perhaps it belonged to a craftsman who whispered that prayer every morning before descending underground. Another tunnel yielded a piece of woven fabric, sealed in silt and perfectly preserved. The edge of a headscarf, dyed pale blue. The dye came from indigo, a color associated with both protection and patience. The man who wore it might have tied it tight to keep the dust away, never knowing that centuries later, his quiet labor would still be remembered. During the Crusader era, new workers entered these hidden passages. Some prisoners, some pilgrims, some soldiers assigned to dig fortifications. A few Crusader documents mention the pit men of the Sepulchre, hired to reinforce the tunnels near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. These men worked by candlelight, carving steps and sealing chambers. They left behind marks, crosses etched into the stone to ward off collapse. Their Latin prayers, written in charcoal, still faintly trace the words, Domini, protege nos sub terra. Lord, protect us beneath the earth. When the Mamluks came to power in the 13th century, the work continued, now under new rulers, new architects. The Mamluks believed that water and stone were sacred trusts. They repaired aqueducts and extended the cistern networks. Scribes recorded the names of noble patrons who funded the projects, but not the hands that carved them. And yet, archaeologists found something beautiful. A small clay oil lamp with the thumbprint of its maker still pressed on its rim. That lamp once lit a worker's face deep below the earth. That fingerprint, now hardened in clay, is the most human of relics. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. The tunnels kept breathing. Ottoman engineers reused them for drainage and defense. Christian monks turned some into cellars and catacombs. In 1867, the British explorer Charles Warren sent his local diggers down through dangerous shafts using ropes and buckets. One of his assistants, an Arab named Ali, wrote in his notes, later found in archives, "The stones are warm like a body, and when you stop to listen they speak." Those words, simple, poetic, reveal something archaeologists often forget. For the men who worked underground, the tunnels were not ruins. They were living spaces, full of whispers and breath. Even today, modern diggers who maintain the tunnels describe the same sensation. "You feel them watching," one said. "The old ones, the builders, as if they left their eyes in the walls." When restoration teams crawl into narrow passages, they sometimes find remnants of older tools. Pickheads made of iron, ropes turned to dust. Each one tells of risk. Underground work was dangerous. Oxygen was scarce, collapses common. Yet they returned day after day, guided by duty and faith. A medieval poet once wrote about the masons of Jerusalem. They build what the sun cannot see, yet the heavens bless their work. Imagine them now. The flicker of their torches, the quiet rhythm of metal on stone, the smell of sweat and earth. The tunnels echo like a slow heartbeat. Each man bent low, carving his piece of eternity. Perhaps one hummed an old song from his village. Perhaps another carved his initials in the dark, just to be remembered. And perhaps, somewhere deep beneath your feet, those marks still wait. A message from one soul to another, across the silence of centuries. Above, the city changed its rulers. Below, the workers never stopped. Because beneath every layer of conquest and faith, there were always hands building, repairing, sustaining. The lost voices of Jerusalem are not truly lost. They are there, in the dust that clings to your fingertips when you touch the old walls. Their story is not one of glory or conquest, but of endurance. They kept the city alive when the world above was at war. And in the quiet hum of the tunnels today, in the dripping water and the soft rush of air, you can still hear them breathing. Water. In Jerusalem it has always meant life. And beneath the ancient stones, it has always moved like a secret. Hidden, guarded, flowing in silence through dark veins of rock. Long before the Crusaders and the Mamluks, before domes and minarets crowned the skyline, water shaped Jerusalem's destiny. The city was built on high, rocky hills, a place of beauty but not abundance. Rain fell in winter, and for the rest of the year the ground stayed thirsty. To survive, its people learned to dig. That digging never stopped. From the earliest days of the Canaanites to the deep medieval centuries, every generation tunneled deeper, carving new cisterns and aqueducts, building a second city beneath the first. If you were to walk those tunnels now, your footsteps would echo through the same channels that once carried the lifeblood of Jerusalem. Every story of water here begins at the Gihon Spring, on the eastern slope of the city of David. It was this spring, small, irregular, unpredictable, that drew the first settlers to the hill nearly 5,000 years ago. But it was also a source of fear. Exposed to enemies, it made the city vulnerable. So, the ancient engineers of Jerusalem did what they always did. They built downward. By the medieval era, Their ancient channels had become part of a sprawling network of cisterns and tunnels. Some were recarved, some expanded, others forgotten until rediscovered centuries later. Yet their purpose remained constant: to hide water, protect it, and move it quietly through stone. Even in the Middle Ages, pilgrims marveled at one particular tunnel, Hezekiah's Tunnel, an engineering marvel carved centuries earlier during the reign of the Judahite king Hezekiah, around 700 BCE. By torchlight, medieval visitors whispered of the water that walked beneath the hill. Crusaders thought it miraculous. Muslim chroniclers called it a river carved by faith. The tunnel winds through bedrock for nearly half a kilometer, linking the Gihon Spring to the Pool of Siloam inside the city's walls. Two teams had dug from opposite ends and met in the middle, guided by sound, a feat so astonishing that even modern engineers marvel at it. During the medieval period, the tunnel still flowed. The cool water provided drinking water and ritual baths for residents of the city of David, and later for Christian and Muslim pilgrims who came seeking purification. Some even claimed the water healed the sick. Archaeologists found traces of medieval plaster inside the tunnel, repairs done by hand centuries after its first completion. The work was crude but careful. The people of every era knew that losing the water meant losing the city. Beneath the Haram al-Sharif or Temple Mount lies another hidden world, a network of vast cisterns cut deep into limestone. Medieval travelers spoke of great chambers of silence, where waters sleep like mirrors. There are said to be more than 30 of them, some large enough to hold entire cathedrals. During the early Islamic period, they were cleaned and expanded, forming one of the most advanced water systems in the world. Rainwater from the surrounding roofs and courtyards was channeled down into these reservoirs through carved gutters and lead pipes. The Mamluks, who ruled from the 13th to 16th centuries, perfected this system. They built ornate fountains, sables, across the city, from which free water was offered to travelers, pilgrims, and the poor. Each sable was inscribed with verses from the Quran, reminding all who drank that water was a gift from God. Below those fountains, stone passages led to underground tanks. The sound of dripping echoed constantly, like a heartbeat beneath the mosque courtyards. In those chambers, one could imagine the city breathing, inhaling rain, exhaling life. Stretching across valleys and hills, aqueducts connected Jerusalem to distant springs. The most famous was the Lower Aqueduct, which brought water from Solomon's pools near Bethlehem into the city. Originally Roman, it was repaired many times during the medieval period, by Umayyad, Crusader, and Mamluk engineers alike. Every ruler, no matter his faith, knew that the aqueduct was the city's artery. To destroy it was to kill Jerusalem. Medieval records mention that during the Crusader occupation, knights from the Order of St. John were tasked with guarding certain sections of the aqueduct. Later, Muslim engineers from Damascus restored its broken arches and built new inspection shafts, sealed with iron rings. The water that arrived from Bethlehem was used for mosques, churches, baths, and bakeries. In dry months, city criers would walk the streets announcing when the aqueduct was open or closed, a ritual that brought both relief and anxiety. Archaeologists working inside these systems today say that the air down there feels ancient. The tunnels are moist, the walls slick with lime and moss. When you whisper, the sound rolls back like a slow wave. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, a single drop of water falls from the ceiling, striking the stone with a soft note. Then another, and another. It becomes a rhythm, like a song that never ends. That sound has been heard for millennia. Priests heard it when they drew water for temple rites. Masons heard it as they repaired the plaster. Pilgrims heard it and thought of eternity. In many ways, water became Jerusalem's truest language, shared across faiths, spoken by the stones themselves. Even today, the ancient channels still carry rainwater when the storms come. Sensors record its movement, archaeologists trace its course, and locals still drink from fountains fed by systems first carved before the Middle Ages. Every time the water flows, it touches stones laid by thousands of hands, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, each one building not for empire but for survival. Beneath the noise of the modern city, that ancient music still plays, the steady murmur of water moving through shadow, keeping the old city alive. And if you listen closely, truly listen, you can hear it soft, patient, eternal. The sound of life beneath Jerusalem. The air changes as you descend. The scent of dust thickens. Torches hiss. The sound of your boots fades into echo. This is the world the Crusaders once knew. A world beneath Jerusalem, a city of tunnels, vaults, and hidden corridors built for war, worship, and survival. By the 12th century, when Crusader banners fluttered over the Holy City, the rulers of the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem had begun to reshape not just the skyline, but the ground beneath. Their conquest in 1099 left the city scarred. Thousands dead, streets burned, wells fouled. To rebuild and defend what they claimed as the center of the Christian world, they looked underground. The Knights Templar and the Hospitallers of St. John were more than warrior monks. They were builders and engineers. When the Templars established their headquarters on the Temple Mount, the site they believed to be Solomon's Temple, they inherited a maze of tunnels and chambers already ancient by their time. To them, it was holy ground and strategic shelter. Contemporary chronicles mention that the Templars made dwellings and stores beneath the temple, where they kept supplies, relics, and, according to rumor, treasures seized during the conquest. The area under the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which they called Templum Solomonis, became their base. Modern archaeologists, studying these substructures, found vaulted halls that once served as stables capable of housing hundreds of horses. The smooth grooves in the stone floors are still visible, the marks of hooves that waited in silence. The Templars also restored sections of older tunnels leading east and north, some connecting to the city's water systems, others to unknown destinations. A few may have been emergency escape routes, wide enough for one man to crawl through in darkness. Across the city, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, built over the believed site of Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, held its own mysteries below ground. In the Crusader period, extensive rebuilding occurred. New chapels, crypts, and storerooms were carved beneath the existing structure to support the weight above. Pilgrims described narrow staircases descending into the rock, where candlelight trembled against ancient graffiti. Crosses, names, prayers scratched by hands from France, England, Germany. Some inscriptions still remain, ghost-like on the stone. These underground chapels served both sacred and practical purposes. When the city was under siege, monks and soldiers used them as shelters. In times of peace, they stored wine, oil, and holy relics. Fragments of Crusader pottery and iron fittings found in those chambers confirm their daily use. The air down there must have smelled of wax, stone dust, and damp, a mixture unchanged for centuries. Even today, the echo of footsteps in those passages feels slow and reverent, like a memory still walking. If the Templars ruled the Temple Mount, the Hospitallers ruled the area near the Church of St. John. Their great fortress in Jerusalem, long vanished, once linked to a series of vaulted cellars and passages. Medieval sources refer to them as domus subterranea, underground houses. These spaces stored grain, medicine, and weapons. The Hospitallers were caretakers of pilgrims and warriors alike. Their hospitals above ground depended on the stores below. When the city was threatened, tunnels connected their compounds to nearby monasteries and churches, allowing movement unseen. In Acre, their later headquarters on the coast, similar tunnels survive, showing the same architectural style. Pointed vaults, carved drains, narrow air shafts. It's likely Jerusalem's network inspired these later designs. In 1187, when Salah ad-Din, Saladin, and his forces surrounded Jerusalem, those secret passages became the Crusaders' last refuge. Chroniclers describe defenders moving through tunnels to shift troops, hide relics, and smuggle messages. One account tells of a hidden stairway beneath the Tower of David leading to a sealed corridor, perhaps once part of the city's Herodian foundations. Through that passage, it was said, the last Latin envoys slipped out at night to negotiate surrender. Though the exact route remains uncertain, excavations around the citadel have revealed layers of tunnels, some Crusader, others older, that match the descriptions. When the city finally fell, those below ground were the last to emerge. Some tunnels were sealed by Saladin's engineers, others forgotten. The conquerors respected the holiness of the city, but feared what they could not see beneath it. Centuries later, explorers rediscovered parts of this buried world. In the 19th century, French archaeologist Charles Clermont-Ganneau crawled through the damp shafts beneath the Temple Mount and found fragments of Crusader masonry, thick mortar, iron nails, bits of glazed tile. He wrote that the silence was total, as if the stones themselves were keeping a vow. Today, guided tours lead visitors through reconstructed sections of the Templar tunnels in the Old City. Cool air flows through the narrow stone corridors, and modern lights trace the medieval arches. Yet the feeling remains, a hushed reverence, a sense that time here moves slower. Some guides pause midway and whisper, "The knights passed here, carrying swords and candles." You can almost hear them, the clink of metal, the soft scrape of boots on limestone, the murmur of prayers in Latin. Each echo feels like a heartbeat returning from the 12th century. The Crusaders are long gone, but their underground Jerusalem endures. A shadow city beneath the Holy One, built on fear and faith, secrecy and devotion. Above, sunlight glitters on domes of gold. Below, darkness remembers their touch. Every vault, every tunnel, every worn stair is part of that legacy. A reminder that the city's greatest defenses were never its walls, but its depths. And even now, as archaeologists map these old Crusader chambers, their instruments pick up faint traces of warmth where the stones were once handled, as though the hands that built them left a little of their life behind. In that silence, you can almost sense them waiting. The knights, the masons, the unseen keepers of the underground. Beneath the golden heart of Jerusalem, the sound of water grows softer now. The ancient cisterns, those vast echoing halls carved from stone, stand half empty. Moist air clings to the walls, thick with the memory of centuries. The water that once sustained the city's people during siege and drought has withdrawn into hidden cracks. And yet, when you close your eyes, you can almost hear it still, whispering like a forgotten prayer. Now we walk deeper. Past the Roman pavements, past Byzantine mosaics, past Crusader arches half buried in time. Every layer tells its own story, but few so haunting as those of the medieval tunnels, built in fear and in faith. Imagine a night in the 12th century. The city above lies quiet, cloaked in the uneasy peace after war. The Crusaders hold the gates, but beneath their feet, workers toil by torchlight. Their task: to rebuild the aqueducts destroyed during Saladin's siege. They whisper as they work, voices bouncing softly through stone. And once in a while, the flame flickers as if the darkness itself breathes. The tunnels were not merely for water. They were arteries of life, routes for secret travel, escape, and survival. When enemies came, the people of Jerusalem vanished into these veins beneath the earth. Priests carried relics. Families carried children. Scrolls wrapped in linen passed from hand to trembling hand, vanishing into chambers so narrow that only a single person could crawl through. And when the noise of battle died above, they waited, breath held, hearts pounding, as dust rained from the ceiling. In the stillness, they could hear the distant thunder of catapults, the clanging of swords, and sometimes, the low chanting of prayers echoing like ghosts. Centuries later, archaeologists found traces of these lives. A rusted lamp, a bronze coin from the reign of Baldwin IV, a carved cross, barely visible beneath a layer of soot. One fragment of parchment, miraculously preserved, bore a simple line in Latin: "In tenebris, Deus est lumen." In darkness, God is light. Now step slowly. The tunnel curves again. The air grows cooler, almost sweet with limestone breath. The faint drip of water becomes a rhythm, a metronome of time itself. Above us, though we cannot see it, stand the holy sites that shaped half the world. The Dome of the Rock, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Western Wall. But here, beneath them, is the other Jerusalem, the hidden one, the city beneath the city. Scholars debate what lies beyond certain sealed passages. Some say old escape routes from the Crusader period. Others whisper of earlier chambers, perhaps from the first temple, buried and untouched. A few even believe the Ark of the Covenant once passed through these depths, though history gives no proof, only silence. What is known, however, is this: every conqueror of Jerusalem, Roman, Byzantine, Arab, Crusader, Ottoman, built not only on the surface but within the earth. Every empire added its layer. Every faith left its mark. The result is a labyrinth that no single map can truly capture. There is a place beneath the northern wall, where narrow arches meet in the dark. When explorers first entered it in the 19th century, their candles revealed something astonishing. Steps descending into a flooded hall, its ceiling low and arched, water reflecting the stone like glass. It was called the Struthian Pool, once used by the Romans, later covered by medieval vaults. The sound of water there was so pure, so hollow, that one explorer described it as the heartbeat of Jerusalem itself. Close your eyes for a moment. Hear that heartbeat. The slow, steady, resonant like time breathing. If you let your imagination drift, you might sense the movement of those who walked before us. Soldiers carrying buckets, monks chanting softly, children clutching their mothers in fear. In these tunnels, time does not pass as it does above. Here, centuries layer over one another like the dust on stone. The echoes you hear may not belong to now. They might belong to 1,000 years ago. There's a story told by early explorers of the 19th century. One of them, a British officer named Charles Warren, lowered himself by rope through a narrow shaft near the Temple Mount. His candle flickered wildly as he touched the bottom. All around him, carved steps vanished into shadow. He felt a cool breeze, impossible that deep underground. He followed it and discovered an ancient passage connecting to the city's lowest cisterns. Later, when he returned to the surface, he wrote in his journal, "The earth beneath Jerusalem is more alive than the city itself." That line has never left historians. For it is true, beneath every prayer whispered above ground, another prayer sleeps below. Beneath every stone walkway, another lies hidden. Beneath every temple, another sanctum waits in silence. The tunnels were also used for secret councils. Medieval chronicles mention how during certain times of unrest, the Knights Templar convened in underground chapels, lit only by oil lamps. The air would shimmer with incense. Their oaths, spoken in low tones, would echo like a vow between worlds. These meetings, they say, took place beneath what is now the Al-Aqsa compound, once the Templar headquarters during the Crusader rule. There, in the substructures known as Solomon's Stables, they believed themselves protectors of the holy city. Their voices, their armor, their prayers, all now gone, yet their presence lingers like the scent of iron and oil. And perhaps, when the wind passes through the ancient shafts today, what you hear isn't just air. It's the sigh of those who once believed they were building eternity. The stones remember, even when men forget. Down here, beneath the hum of the living city, sound travels differently. It rolls through stone like mist through an empty field. Every whisper, every drop of water seems eternal. As we move further through these ancient arteries, a faint light glows ahead, a shimmer from the reflection of a small pool. The water is still, untouched, black as polished glass. It reflects the ceiling's rough arches, like the ribs of a sleeping giant. This, historians believe, may have been part of the Hasmonean water system, adapted and reused by medieval engineers. They did not build from nothing. They inherited the bones of the city, carving new veins through older ones, joining ancient tunnels into a living network. The Crusaders called it aqua sacra, the holy water. To them, the water of Jerusalem was not mere survival. It was sanctified, a link to the divine. The monks would bless the cisterns before every great feast, their chants echoing softly in the stone, candles quivering like stars trapped underground. You can almost hear them if you listen. A low Gregorian hum, faint and patient. Dominus custodit. The Lord keeps you. Now imagine the world above. The 12th century sunlight, harsh and golden, beating down on the limestone domes. Pilgrims moving through narrow alleys. Merchants shouting in Arabic and French, the mingled scent of spices, oil and sweat. And all the while beneath their feet, this other city slept, cool and silent. Somewhere under the old city's Christian quarter, beneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, archaeologists found narrow stairways that descend into darkness. The stones there are Roman, but the markings, small crosses and Latin inscriptions, belong to the medieval age. Some believe these lower chambers were used by monks seeking silence, their prayers protected by layers of earth. Others think they were hiding places, when the city changed hands as it so often did. Jerusalem in those centuries was a city of constant transformation. Crusaders seized it in 1099, drenched it in fire and blood. Then, in 1187, Saladin's forces reclaimed it, bringing a new peace, gentle compared to what came before, yet still shadowed by the ghosts of conquest. And beneath it all, the tunnels remained untouched. They belonged to no one and everyone. There are accounts from Muslim chroniclers too, travelers who spoke of the veins of the city, where cool water flowed unseen. One, Ibn al-Fari, wrote in the 13th century, "Beneath the noble sanctuary lies a world unseen by sunlight, where stones breathe and the air is older than men." It's strange, isn't it? How across faiths and centuries, all who walked this land spoke of the same mystery below. Let us move further down. Our lantern's light falls on carvings now, faint outlines of letters in Greek, Latin, and Arabic. A patchwork of languages, each left by those who passed through in silence. The wall feels cold beneath your fingertips, smooth in some places, jagged in others. Here, archaeologists discovered what they call the Crusader Hall, a wide, vaulted chamber hidden under layers of later stonework. It may have served as a storage room for the Knights Templar, or perhaps a chapel. Its ceiling still bears soot from the lamps that once burned there. And when the last explorer's torch flickered for a second, the shadows seemed to take shape, like men kneeling, heads bowed, whispering into eternity. There's a quiet power in knowing these stones have seen so much. Empires rose and fell above them. Faiths collided. Kings and sultans made promises that dust has long erased. But these walls, they watched it all, patiently, wordlessly. At times, the air grows heavy, damp, and then suddenly cool, as if the earth itself exhales. It's easy to lose your sense of direction here. Every turn looks familiar. Every corridor echoes the last. That's why even modern explorers still use ropes and markers. Some tunnels lead to dead ends. Others lead to vast halls with ceilings so high you can't see where they end. And yet, deep beneath all of it, there is a place so ancient that its age blurs beyond the medieval. Scholars call it Warren's Shaft, a natural vertical tunnel discovered in the 19th century but likely used thousands of years earlier, and reused again and again by those who came after. The Crusaders may have known of it. So too might the early Islamic engineers who built water channels through the city. It connects the upper city with the Ghian Spring, the city's oldest water source. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture the dripping water, the hollow echo, the distant rustle of movement. You might almost feel the cool spray against your skin. The walls are slick, dark green with age, and the sound of water grows deeper, fuller, not like a stream, but like a heartbeat, slow and alive. Even now, in modern Jerusalem, the tunnels continue to breathe. Electric lights trace their paths. Tourists walk where monks once prayed. But if you pause long enough and listen, the noise of the modern city fades. You might hear what Charles Warren heard. You might feel what Saladin's builders felt. Awe, reverence, and the humbling awareness that the ground beneath your feet holds more memory than any book ever could. And perhaps, just perhaps, those who once hid, prayed, or built here still linger, not in form but in essence. Their whispers blend with the wind that moves through the old shafts. Their stories cling to the moisture on the walls. Their faith still glows faintly in the dark. The city sleeps beneath itself, and dreams of all it has been. The lantern flickers once, twice, and then steadies. The air feels different now. Lighter, cooler, almost peaceful. After so many turns through the ancient veins of stone, the hush begins to feel familiar, like the quiet heartbeat of something vast and timeless. Here, beneath all the layers of conquest and faith, the city simply is. No crusader, no sultan, no pilgrim or priest, only stone and water and silence. You trace your fingers along a wall smoothed by 1,000 hands. The stone feels warm, almost alive. Every inch of it remembers someone. Someone who built, who prayed, who hid, who dreamed. In this stillness, their presence gathers around you like invisible light. For centuries, people have sought meaning in these depths. They searched for relics, for tunnels to Solomon's temple, for proofs of prophecy. But perhaps the real secret was simpler. Jerusalem's soul was never just above ground. It was here too, hidden in the earth, patient and enduring. As you begin the long climb back toward the surface, the echoes fade behind you. The quiet drip of water, the sigh of air through unseen passages, the memory of torches burning in endless dark. Each sound grows softer, until it becomes only breath. Now you reach the stairway leading upward. A faint glow filters down, sunlight distant but real. You feel it on your face, warm and golden, chasing the chill from your skin. The tunnel narrows, then widens again, and at last you emerge. The world above is bright, loud, alive. The cries of merchants, the tolling of bells, the murmur of prayers from minarets. But something inside you is quiet now, quiet in a way that feels ancient. Because you've touched the heartbeat beneath the city, and once you've heard it, you never quite forget. Sit for a moment, just at the edge of sunlight and shadow. Breathe in the warm air, scented with dust and history. Close your eyes, listen, and you can still feel the rhythm of the world below. The secret cities beneath Jerusalem are not gone. They live in memory, in myth, in the slow pulse of time. They are the silent keepers of all that was and all that remains. Now take a deep breath, and let it out slowly. Feel your shoulders relax, your heartbeat slowing to match the deep rhythm of the stones. Another breath, in and out. You are here in this moment. But part of you still lingers down there, in the cool air among the arches and pools, where the city whispers its oldest prayer. Is always peace. When you open your eyes again, the noise of the world will return. But carry that quiet with you. Carry the sense of age and patience and the deep, calm knowing of stone. The tunnels are still waiting beneath all our noise. And maybe one day you'll listen again.